Marvellous. Well, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Michael Ryan to the sixth in the series of Media Lunch Club podcasts. Michael, hi. Could you perhaps begin by introducing yourself and, well, maybe rattle through a few of your greatest hits?
Yes, singing or film wise.
Do you know what? I'm coming to singing. I'm excited to talk singing, but let's start with the films.
Okay, well, so you know who I am. I'm Michael Ryan. I formed an independent film company in 1978 when the days of foreign sales were in their infancy, and started selling independent films in that way. Um, and that seemed to go rather well. Some of the movies you might recognize: Kiss of a Spider Woman. There's all the Highlander series. I started with the first one, financed that. Um, uh, what's Eating Gilbert Grape? Johnny Depp, Leonardo DiCaprio, various other things. I mean, I could go on, but it'll
Well, do you
it'll
know what?
bore you to death.
Well, you say that, but I want to jump in and immediately I just bend my knees and say The Wild Geese, one of my favourite films.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that wasn't bad at all. And quite a lot of others. I mean, there are the smaller ones. I mean, The English Patient was obviously one that attracted a lot of or garnered a lot of Academy Awards, which was exciting. And we put together that, and then did a deal with Harvey Weinstein, to name but a few. And he then handled it, and probably, in the days when he was concentrating on his work, did a fantastic job. And six Oscars was not bad in one night.
It's a pretty good haul, isn't it? And how did that opportunity come about in the first place? Can you remember how The English Patient came across your desk?
Yeah, my partner Julia Palau was with her husband was with Saul Zaentz, and he was doing most of his consultancy. Um, and we were acting as unpaid advisors, I suppose, on how to put together pictures. So we did Mosquito Coast and various others with him. And what he was doing was basically hocking everything he had and financing the films that way. So we said to him, look, you don't have to do that. You don't have to hock your studio and your San Francisco based mansion and all the rest of it. He was quite a wealthy man, but that didn't seem to me to be very wise. And we said, let us have a go at it. So I met Michael Ondaatje. We got together, and it was working very well. I actually thought that it was a pretty unfilmable, but it was brilliantly written, and we sold it very well, I must say. So we put the package together. It was about 20 something million, 27, I think it was,
Mm.
dollars. And we started selling it at Cannes that year. And then coming back from Cannes, Harvey's people had been to see us in Cannes and reported back to him, and we did the deal at the end of May that month. The rest is history. So it wasn't bad.
Was there a point in the process where you realised that you had an enormous hit on your hands?
Well, bearing in mind that Saul Zaentz had, the Cuckoo's Nest, and a few other brilliant movies, we stood a very good chance. We thought. The the genius part of it was getting Anthony Mingella to both write it and direct it, because if you've read the book, it's fairly impenetrable.
Yeah.
And you've got the star of the movie, who is a guy who's burnt to a crisp, and that is a difficult thing to film. So he was responsible for. He was the genius part of it. Um, I don't think I realised at the time um, how brilliant it was going to be. I think it's difficult to imagine that. As soon as we saw the first cut, we thought, this is something very special.
Yeah, and indeed it turned out to be. And alongside that, I mean, some of the names you've just rattled off are absolutely extraordinary. I mean, titans in the business. I've actually got a question here from Steve Blackman, a member of the Lunch Club Committee, who would like to know, what memories do you have of working with Lord Lew Grade?
Well, yeah, there's a legend.
Yeah.
We were talking about him very recently. Actually, there was a very good article. I think it was in one of the daily newspapers, Daily Express or Daily Mail. I don't know, not ones that I particularly read, but somebody sent me it. It was an extraordinary time because Lew was in the business of reinventing himself and the film business, really. And my job with a couple of other people was to go out and get him some money back. So I started there in television, and eventually went into. He actually said to me, "Do you fancy selling films, Mike?" And I said, "Well, yeah, why not? It sounds a bit more colourful than, maybe doing The Saint and The Pretenders." And he said, "Well, we're going to start the film division, and I'd like you to be part of it." Okay. So I said, "Well, so what does that mean about salary and all that?" And he said, "No, no, there's no more money in it. You just have to work a bit harder." And he said it'll be very glamorous. You can go to Cannes, all of that stuff. Anyway, that was basically it, and off we went. And it was quite a while that we're kind of reinventing the whole thing, because apart from Mark Damon and a few other people, you didn't finance films that way. It started very early on with a few brave people, John Cassavetes amongst them, um, who decided that this was a way of doing it. But pre-selling it in the way we started to do it was unheard of. And I can remember going to one particular film market and coming back with a list of titles that we'd sold, and we'd done about $130 million worth of business in 7 or 8 days. And I'm not suggesting those days are over, but that would be quite a difficult task to do now.
Yeah, it leads me to another question we've had in from John Wolstenholme, actually, which is, COVID aside, do you think it's easier or more difficult to get projects greenlit now than, say, 20 years ago? Which direction is it heading in?
It's much more difficult. I mean, 20 years ago, you could stick a poster on your wall and sell the film rights to it without anything else, just a pretty picture. Yeah, it is difficult. I mean, there are two ends of the spectrum now. The very low budget uh, kind of thriller horror pictures, and very low budget, I mean, probably under $2 million.
Mm.
And then the very special pictures that would be, upwards of 10 to 20. But once you go over 20 or 25, it's very difficult to do independently. I mean, that's a tough call. Everybody mentions, well, now you've got all the streamers, Netflix and all the rest of it, but they're all about world domination. They're all about creating their own content, and they very rarely buy rights, international rights to movies, from independent salespeople or independent producers. So they want them in house and they want them working for Netflix, and that's it. Um, so it is much more difficult. You there's a there's a sort of saving grace in the business that um, co-productions have overtaken pre-sales, because pre-sales are so difficult. Everybody's very conservative. I mean, COVID aside, everybody's incredibly conservative and nervous. Nobody really knows which way it's going. So I'm finding that co-production is the way to go.
Hmm.
Trying to pre-sell the rights to a movie in France or the UK, especially the UK, very difficult right now. But it is possible to do a co-production. It is. There seems to be much more appetite for that, and that's helping us. If you're making your own movies, which most companies like mine do, it's the way to go.
Yeah, that's GFM Films. It was that
Yeah,
founded in 2011 with Guy Collins and Fred Hedman,
that's right.
and
That's right.
specialising in animation. Now, I have a kindred spirit here because I used to be a screenwriter on Pingu and Charlie and Lola, and for briefly Wallace and Gromit. So I
Oh, that's
love the way.
exciting.
Yeah, I mean it was great, and my career has segued in various different directions as it often does in the business. But I look back very fondly on it, and I think I'm keen to get your thoughts actually on the position that animation is in. I mean, I guess with the terrible pandemic we're facing, it's one of the few areas of the business which, to some extent, can actually continue.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we kind of got into. I did it years ago. I did at J&M, my previous company, we did 3 or 4 films with Don Bluth,
Mm.
who at that time had a big studio in Ireland and was making, big budget movies, mostly publicly funded in those days. The Irish were giving him everything, which didn't last for too long. So I started it then, a long time ago, and then we got back into it with a big Spanish co-production that we did called Planet 51, and that did really well. And we did a deal with Sony in the United States. It grossed $50 million, which for an independently financed animated movie,
Yeah.
I think still is a record. Um, and so we kind of became the go-to company independently for animation, and it's grown ever since. And in a way, that's proved to be a very lucky a piece of luck because now with COVID, the worldwide pandemic, the plague, um, it's only really animated movies that are sensible to make. I mean, we're making Blazing Samurai
Mm.
at the moment, which is a cartoon take on Blazing Saddles. In fact, Mel Brooks is actually in the film.
Is he?
Yeah, he is.
Oh,
Yeah,
terrific.
we did the deal with him. It was 50-50 jointly owned with Warner Brothers and between Warner Brothers and Mel, and we did the deal, which was expensive and tough. And having done it all, he said there is one more thing, and then you think, oh no. He said I'd like a part in the movie.
Wow.
So, which was, I mean,
That's yeah.
I would never even have dreamed of asking him, but and so he got it, and he just finished his recording 2 weeks ago. So that was kind of a stroke of luck, but that's a $47 million animated movie, completely independently financed, and there's a couple of hundred people working right now in Montreal, making the movie. It's on time, it's on budget, um, and that's saving a lot of people's lives
Yeah.
because you can't do that. You can't make a big and independent live action movie like that. It can't happen at the moment. Unfortunately, we're starting a small movie, a thriller, in Serbia at the end of September. Now that all looks okay, but at the moment, who the hell knows? I mean, we're financed. We've got a completion bond. We've got everything going. We've got an exemption in terms of COVID insurance, which was a stroke of genius, I must
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
And we're going. But it's tough. How do you film a love scene?
Yeah.
How do you film a fight? How do you film a murder? You can't do that from 2 meters or 1.5 meters. It's
Yeah.
it's really difficult. So the animation world is really saving our lives at the moment, and we're making some really big ones. So I mean, it used to be that we were 70% animation and 30%. Sorry, the other way around. It used to be 70% live action. Now we're doing most of our work is in animation, and
Yeah.
it's great. I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and that's where the European co-production model is really important,
Yeah.
and it's working really well. I mean, it's a healthy marketplace. There's a lot of federal and state aid all over Europe. So that's it. Listen, it's never easy, but
No.
it's certainly a business that we're glad to be part of, and we're doing really well in it too.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something there that I always love the world of animation really for two reasons. One is that imaginatively you can literally do anything. You can take the story physically in any direction, and that's just a gift if you're writing a screenplay. But also the collaborations. I love hearing talk of collaborating with people across Europe and productions taking place in Montreal. This is a global industry, and I think animation, like no other sector, really has seized that and as a result, it's producing some really really interesting content.
Yeah, it really is interesting because I find the packaging and financing of animated movies um, easier in the sense that people are willing to take a risk. And there's some very healthy studios out there in some surprising places.
Mm.
This is not a Hollywood dominated world at all. There's a huge amount of European animation going on. And we're finding partners, you know, in Germany, Italy, Ireland, Spain. I mean, it's really it's very international,
Mm.
and these people are extremely imaginative, and they get a lot of state aid, and grants, but at the same time they're reinvesting that in their own businesses, and they're very bright people, and there's some great work going on out there.
I think that's it, isn't it? And actually, a lot of the countries have traditions of their own in these realms. But I got a question from Nick Haig, and it does concern COVID. We've touched on it, but longer term, Nick would like to know, how do you think it will change the film and television industry in production and distribution?
Oof, that's a tough one. I mean, rather like most governments, and especially ours,
Mm.
we don't really know, I think, is the answer. I mean, we what do we do? We're some people are working. There's movies shooting now in a lot of countries, live action movies. Um, Distribution is really a question, isn't it? I mean, we're opening and closing theatres daily in all sorts of places, and Tenet will be interesting just to have a look at the figures of that. Christopher Nolan managed to persuade the studio to release it theatrically, and we'll see how that goes. But it's a massive movie, obviously. I don't know the answer. I mean, the answer is we're going to go very slowly. There'll be a lot of casualties, already are, um, and we'll just have to make movies in a different way. I mean, the policing of it is very difficult. I mean, this one that we're doing in Serbia is only a small movie. It's a $2.5 million movie, euro, sorry. Um, and the sort of even in Serbia, the sort of policing that's going on, and we have nurses on the set, we have all sorts of technicians telling us what to do. Obviously, we have to do it, but we are managing to make it. It's made it very difficult. It's delayed the movie by about 6 months, but we are able to do it. I'm not sure that we'd be able to do as much as we're doing in the UK or the US. It's probably a little bit easier in Eastern Europe. But they've had their problems too. They're just, I read yesterday, in fact, they're just opening their cinemas in Serbia.
Mm.
So there is some good news. I'm not sure myself whether I want to go to the cinema right now.
Yeah.
It's bad enough riding on an aeroplane, but sitting in a seat in a cinema, I don't know, with a mask on, it's not really my idea of enjoyment. Really difficult. And we are selling movies. Distributors are buying them. They're buying them mostly, I think, for the rights that they can exploit because they're not releasing them theatrically. They can't. It's too much of a risk. The P&A costs are still the same.
Yeah.
Advertising, PR, publicity is all the same. Hasn't come down. But there's very little reward. I mean, I have to think that theatrical experience will come back.
Mm.
But anybody who thinks this is over soon is joking, and it's very difficult. There's a huge world out there in terms of streaming and pay television, and that's probably our lifeline at the moment.
I think
Uh,
I think that's true. And I think looping back to something you said earlier on, it's a nervy business as it is. But I half wonder counterintuitively whether the pandemic might galvanize people when they do get opportunities to really, double down and dig in and go for it. Whether we might become all the more collegiate as a result.
well, I agree with you. You know, certainly in the UK, not the US, bizarrely,
Mm.
but there is a feeling of we've got to help each other here. With the collegiate spirit is something that I hope spills over into the movie industry. Um, Certainly, we're finding financiers, bankers are happy to do deals. I guess there's not enough of them, so they're desperate to do some, like all of us. Um, Take my money, take my money. But it's really an interesting time. Nobody knows anything, and that is the whole point of this. And you just have to reinvent the wheel every single time you do a deal. Um, but I think there is certainly we've experienced a lot of goodwill on behalf of distributors and financiers to get things moving. It's an industry that needs to make product. And I think that the television world or the broadcasting world, the streaming world, is saving our lives at the moment. And we see by what's happened with Disney, with Netflix, with Amazon, we've seen how many subscribers they've added during the last 6 months or so. It's enormous. So that's part of the, as you said, the part of the collegiate spirit that I think we need to have. And certainly, in my experience, in the last 3 or 4 months, people are out there wanting to do business, and it's a matter of how you get around these or get through all these regulations that allow us to do something. I have to say it's all experimental at the moment, and we will, I'm sure, find ways of doing it. There's some big movies starting. The big Cinderella movie is starting shooting again in about 3 weeks in the UK. So they're doing it. It's a huge movie. It's $100 million plus. So there is a way of doing it. They're working in teams. There is a spirit out there that says we know people want to view movies. Let's get out there and make them.
Yeah, it's encouraging, isn't it? And I think that's bang on. We really do want to watch movies. We definitely need to be entertained, and we'll continue to need that sense of our spirits being elevated, taken on journeys, and to think about something other than the terrible situation that we all find ourselves in. Linda Stevens has asked, what do you look for in a project when it comes to you, when a producer approaches you? Is it part finance in place, or cast and crew in place, or some soft monies outside of the tax credit? What draws you to a project, or is it more kind of the script or the idea, or what is it?
Well, I suppose originality is certainly uppermost in my mind, and we're able, thankfully, to take pictures at various different stages. We're not really developing our own from scratch, so a producer with maybe some talent attached or some money attached is always welcome. But it varies totally. Originality is certainly, for me, the main thing, and that means the writing and the subject matter. So we can take it from there, and there are people out there who are willing to help us develop projects. It's fantastic if you get something with a director attached. For us to do something from scratch, we're doing it, but it's not. We're not a studio. We can't keep the development process takes years,
Yeah.
and we're just in the middle of casting a movie called Severance, which we've had, oh God knows. I mean, it's probably been on our books for the last 8 or 9 years, and we're now making it. So,
Yeah.
but independently, that's a very difficult thing to do. We
Yeah,
managed to raise some money.
It's a funny one, isn't it? Because I speak to people outside of the industry, and I know I've got buddies who similar situations who've developed movies over decades that finally do get greenlit. But in a way, it's that process. The script is everything, but it is always that process, I think, that sifts things through and really tests the idea over and over and over again. And there are so many moments, as you well know, when things can fall apart. It's always quite a thing when actually finally you do see it on the screen, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a sort of temptation to become so bored with it, you don't want to
Yeah,
see don't
yeah,
want to
it's
see the
like
movie yourself.
yeah, exactly.
But I mean, it's a weird business, isn't it? I mean,
It is.
who knows why it works? Um, but you're right. I mean, it takes, even in our position where we're buying into things that are hopefully written. We're still, as soon as the director comes on board, he wants to rewrite, and it's a business that there's too many experts, and
Yeah,
it is a difficult one. If a director worth his salt comes on and says, nah, it's not quite right, I need to tweak it, and can you get me another writer? And it goes on forever, and that's the problem. So it does make it difficult, and it makes it a very long process, and you you certainly need stamina. That's
yeah.
true.
It's managing
Yeah,
all the minds, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, and these days, when I remember when I was starting out, people reading scripts, that didn't used to happen. Very rarely would a distributor in mainland Europe even bother to read it.
Really?
And these days, you've got the buyer in Burma or Pakistan who says, "Oh, I need to read the script."
Yeah.
It's I mean, thank God in a way.
Yeah, I was going to say it's reassuring, isn't it? There's that
It
much.
is. Yeah, people care about what's on the page, and whether they're experts in it or not. They presumably are experts in their own territory at what their audience want, and they should be reading it. They should know that it's going to work.
Yeah. And I think, to be honest, I think you, of all the people that I've interviewed in this series, you might be the person who does know best because you've been elected. You're 5 times chairman of the Independent Film and Television Alliance, 2003, 2005, 2015, 2017, and 2019. Now that is unprecedented. What have you got that no one else has?
Patience and patience and diplomacy. Yeah, it is fairly extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, I wanted to do it in the first place because I felt that it needed a non-American because it's now such a hugely international business. It was, first of all, it was a misnomer because the American Film Marketing Association, who said it was American? And that's why I started doing it, and it's grown immensely. I think more than 50% of our members are now non-American. So yeah, and I think it's this AFM is going to be interesting because obviously it's virtual, um, and there's a huge amount of planning going into that right now, and that'll be an interesting one. But we need the AFM to work in order to fund the association. The association is doing huge work around the world. I mean, if it hadn't been for IFTA, we would be struggling to make films in Europe right now because of what the EU stupidly wanted to do.
Mm.
They wanted we want European citizens to have free access to the internet on all the programming. So that basically means you wouldn't be able to make any movies.
Yes, no
And
possibilities. Yeah.
I know it's crazy. We lobbied and lobbied and lobbied and eventually won. I mean, we'll see because they're changing their membership each and every year.
Mm.
But those are the sort of things that we can do by having an effect. Where that we've got hundreds of members now, and it's turned into a very important organisation.
Yeah.
And fiscally, it's difficult. I mean, funding a non-profit organisation is a tough one.
Yeah. And I mean, if people want to find out more, the website is ifta-online.org. I'm just wondering, what's the most rewarding part of that job for you, Michael?
I think seeing what was, when I started, Julia, my partner in J&M, Julia Palau, and I started it with a few kind of cowboy people. I include myself in that because there was no regulation whatsoever. And there was no power, and we had to have some sort of help in order to do that. And I think the pleasure in it for me has been finding regulations and having the association accepted, like the MPAA. We're now on a par with them, going to Washington, going to Europe, and negotiating on a par with them. And I think it needed regulation, it needed guidance, it needed some help. All of that has been really put together. Gene Pruitt and Jonathan Wolfe have been at it for a long time, and I think they're tremendous people. And it's never going to be an easy task, is it? It's like I often refer to my job as chairman of it as trying to herd cats. It's really not possible. But we managed to do it, and we've managed to put together some basic structure and some rules, and making it a business that works. And I think that's certainly the negotiating with parliaments and state bodies and all the rest of it is never easy. But it makes it a bit easier in that we've got an association which is looking after its peers, and I think that's very important. So, yeah, I mean, we have very active members. Some of them, this year's board members, have been superb, and there's some very difficult moments, of course, especially now.
Mm.
Those people, it's governed by its members, and some of those people are really exceptional. So it is working, and I am proud of it. I'm proud that it's working well.
Yeah, rightly so. But you're not just the front man of IFTA. I've got to ask you about the singing. Your band, the Indies. Are we going to get a song? Can you give us a little blast or?
Yeah, too early.
Too early. Fair enough. Is there somewhere where we can go and see performances or hear the band, or have you got any online?
Well, of course not at the moment. We're struggling. I mean, I was just saying the other day how wonderful it would be to get together with the band and play somewhere, or even in a studio. I mean, you can't do that.
Zoom. I was going to say you could do a live Zoom gig. I would tune in and I would pay my door fee to see that.
Thank you, Ollie.
Yeah, more than welcome.
Yeah, we've had our moments. The band has certainly had its moments, and probably the pinnacle of it was the House of Blues in LA.
Oh wow!
That was amazing.
How did that come about?
I luck and fortune. I knew the guy that owned it, and we filled the place with 2,000 people.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, we even had the fire brigade come and shut the door and say you can't have any more people in. We're only licensed for 1,800 people, and we had 2,000 people. So there have been moments, and it has been brilliant. And we still do it occasionally. There's the odd wedding. We all look at each other and say, "Really? Are we too old for this?" But no,
never too old. And
no.
The next gig, I'm sure every single member of the Lunch Club will join me in saying that we will all come and support the Indies. They sound absolutely great. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Ollie. Thank you very much. It's really nice. I'm sitting here. I'm on holiday at the moment, so I'm looking at the Sierra Nevadas
tremendous,
and a beautiful green garden.
Please tell me you've got a cold beer in your hand.
I haven't yet. It's still a bit early.
What are you talking about? You're on holiday. It's never too early. That's job number one.
It will not be long, I can tell you.
Good man. Thanks so much, Michael. And,
all right, Ollie. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.